My parents demanded I invite my sister, who slept with my ex, to my wedding, so I invited the one person they betrayed most, and chaos broke loose. I always imagined my wedding day would be perfect. You know, one of those fairy tale moments where everything falls into place and everyone celebrates your happiness. Instead, what should have been the most beautiful day of my life turned into a circus of family drama that still makes my stomach knot when I think about it. Let me introduce myself. I'm Katie, 27 years old, and recently married to the love of my life. But before I dive into the wedding day disaster, you need to understand my family dynamic and why things exploded the way they did. Growing up, I was the invisible child in a family of 5. My mother epitomizes what people now call an almond mom, constantly dieting, obsessing over appearance, and making subtle comments about what's on your plate. "Katie, are you sure you want that second helping?" was her favorite question at dinner. Her scrutiny followed me through adolescence, shaping my relationship with food and my own body into something complicated and painful. My father's personality revolves entirely around money. If a conversation doesn't involve profit margins, investment returns, or market trends, his eyes glaze over. During my childhood, I could count on one hand the number of meaningful conversations we had that didn't somehow circle back to finances or my sister's achievements. My sister. Where do I even begin? She's 5 years older than me and has been the undisputed golden child since before I was born. According to family lore, she didn't take the news of my impending arrival well. "We don't need another baby," she reportedly told my parents when they announced the pregnancy. This sentiment apparently never changed. Growing up with her was like living with a perfectly crafted illusion. To the outside world, she was charming, accomplished, and kind. Behind closed doors, she was calculating and cruel, particularly to me. She had a special talent for making my life miserable while maintaining her flawless reputation. "Mom, Katie broke your crystal vase," she'd call out, holding the shattered pieces she'd deliberately knocked over herself. "Dad, I saw Katie going through your wallet earlier," she'd whisper, though I hadn't even been in the same room as his wallet. The worst part? They always believed her. Every single time. The only person who ever saw through the facade was my grandmother, my savior in that household. Grandma was warm, genuine, and perceptive. When I'd come to her in tears after another of my sister's sabotages, she'd pull me close and whisper, "I know, sweetheart. I see what's happening." She couldn't always intervene. My parents were immovable in their favoritism, but knowing someone believed me kept me sane. I was also close with my aunt when I was younger. She was the cool adult in my life, the one who'd take me for ice cream after a bad day at school or listen to my rambling stories without checking her watch. We'd spend weekends together baking cookies or watching movies, simple activities that felt like oxygen in the suffocating environment of my home. Then suddenly, when I was about 13, she disappeared from our lives. One day she was there, and the next, she wasn't. No one would tell me why. When I asked about her, my parents' expressions would harden, and they'd change the subject. It was like she had committed some unforgivable sin, but I was too young to be trusted with the details. Around the same time, I was shipped off to boarding school. My parents framed it as an opportunity, but looking back, it's clear they wanted me gone. The catalyst was a family heirloom, a crystal bowl that had been passed down for generations. One afternoon, I heard a crash from the living room. I ran in to find my sister standing over the shattered remains, a look of calculated panic on her face. "Katie was running around and knocked it over," she told my parents when they rushed in, her voice trembling perfectly. I tried to catch it, but I couldn't reach it in time. I still remember the fury in my father's eyes, the disappointment in my mother's. "That's the last straw," Dad said, his voice cold. "You're going to boarding school. We clearly can't handle you here anymore." I tried to defend myself, but it was useless. 2 weeks later, I was packing my bags. Boarding school became my new reality. At first, it felt like exile, but eventually, it became a refuge. Away from my family's dynamics, I could finally breathe. I made real friends who liked me for me, not because they wanted to get close to my popular sister. I discovered interests and talents that weren't immediately compared to hers. For the first time, I was just Katie, not the troublemaker or the other daughter. The distance also gave me perspective. I realized how dysfunctional my family truly was. My parents never attended parents' weekends or school performances. Once, I had a piano recital where I played a challenging piece I'd practiced for months. I scanned the audience beforehand, hoping against hope to see their faces, but there were only strangers and other parents. I played well, my teacher said it was my best performance yet, but afterward, as other students were embraced by proud parents, I stood alone. When I won first place at the science fair in my sophomore year, I called home excitedly. My mother answered, sounding distracted. "That's nice, honey. Oh, did I tell you? Your sister just got accepted to that prestigious summer internship program. The one that only takes 5 students nationwide. We're taking her out to celebrate tonight." After a while, their absence stopped hurting. It became normal, expected. I built a life without them at its center. After graduating, I decided to move back to my hometown for college. Perhaps foolishly, I thought things might be different. I was older now, more independent. Maybe we could forge a new, more adult relationship. I was wrong. Living with my sister again was like stepping back into a war zone. She'd established herself as something of a local celebrity, popular, well-connected, the girl everyone wanted to know. I, on the other hand, was the awkward returnee trying to find my footing. She couldn't stand the idea of sharing even an ounce of attention. The sabotage started immediately, more sophisticated than when we were children but no less cruel. "Oh, Katie's always been a late bloomer academically," she'd casually mentioned to mutual acquaintances at parties, though my grades had always been excellent. "It's so sweet how she tries, though." She'd throw elaborate gatherings at our house but conveniently forget to tell me until I walked in on a living room full of strangers. "Oh, I thought you'd be at the library," she'd say with faux innocence. "You're always studying, aren't you?" Then came prom night. I'd been dating Jason for about 6 months, my first serious relationship. He was kind, funny, and made me feel seen in a way I rarely experienced at home. We had plans to attend prom together, and for once, I was genuinely excited about a school event. The night of prom, I was putting the finishing touches on my makeup when I realized I'd left my earrings in my sister's room. She'd borrowed them without asking the week before. I walked in without knocking, a mistake I still regret, and found them together. My sister and Jason. On her bed. She didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Instead, she met my shocked gaze with a triumphant smile, as if to say, "See? I can take anything of yours whenever I want." I ran to my mother, tears streaming down my face, makeup ruined. "Mom, I just caught Susan with Jason," I sobbed, hoping for comfort, support, anything. She barely looked up from her magazine. "Oh, Katie, don't be so dramatic. These things happen. Besides, you're too young for serious relationships anyway." That was it. The final straw. I packed a bag that night and crashed at a friend's house. The next day, I applied for a transfer to a university in another city. I was done trying to be part of a family that clearly didn't want me. The next few years were transformative. I finished college and then graduate school in my new city, making real friends and building a life I was proud of. I had to ask my parents for tuition assistance, which they grudgingly provided, though I later learned it was actually my grandmother who had been covering the costs all along. It was during this time that I met Michael. We were paired for a group project in our final year of university, and something just clicked. He was thoughtful, genuine, and treated me with a respect I wasn't used to. He listened when I spoke and remembered the details of what I said. He celebrated my successes without comparing them to anyone else's. After 2 years of dating, he proposed during a weekend trip to the coast. It was simple and perfect, just us on the beach at sunset, with the promise of a future filled with the kind of love and support I'd always craved. When I called my family to share the news, their reaction was predictably lukewarm. "Oh, that's nice," my mother said, her voice flat. "Have you thought about how you'll fit into your dress? You might want to start a diet regimen now." My father's response was equally uninspiring. "Well, I hope this boy has a decent job. Marriage isn't cheap, you know." My sister didn't even bother to call back when I left her a message. Despite their lackluster response, I decided to extend an olive branch. After all, this was my wedding, maybe it could be a fresh start for all of us. My mother suggested I come back home for the wedding. "It makes more sense logistically," she said. "All our connections are here." But I had built a life in my new city. My friends were here. Michael's family, who had embraced me with open arms, was nearby. And frankly, I didn't trust my family not to take over and make the day about them, or more specifically, about my sister. So I declined politely and began planning a wedding locally. My mother-in-law, Janet, and sister-in-law, Emma, stepped up in ways I never expected. They helped scout venues, tasted cake samples with me, and spent hours looking at flower arrangements. Janet even hosted a beautiful bridal shower, complete with personalized touches that showed how well she'd come to know me. "We're so happy you're joining our family," she told me that day, hugging me tight. "Michael's lucky to have found you." I nearly cried. This was what family was supposed to feel like. As the big day approached, I sent out invitations, carefully curated to include those who truly supported our relationship. My sister's name was conspicuously absent from the envelope addressed to my parents. A week later, my mother called. "Katie, there seems to be a mistake with the invitations," she said, her voice falsely cheerful. "You didn't include Susan's name. But don't worry, I've already told her about the wedding, and we'll all be there." I took a deep breath. "Mom, that wasn't a mistake. I didn't invite Susan intentionally." There was a pause, then a forced laugh. "Don't be silly, Katie. Of course your sister is coming to your wedding. This is a family event." "Mom, she slept with my ex-boyfriend. On prom night. I don't want her there." Her tone shifted instantly from dismissive to furious. "That was years ago. Are you still holding on to that childish grudge? For God's sake, Katie, grow up. Families forgive each other. This is your chance to rebuild your relationship with her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Rebuild what relationship? There's never been anything to rebuild. She's made my life miserable since I was born, and you've enabled her every step of the way. That's not true. We've always treated you girls equally. You've just always been difficult, always looking for problems where there aren't any. I laughed bitterly. "Sure, Mom. Whatever you need to tell yourself." "Listen carefully," she said, her voice turning cold. "If Susan isn't welcome at the wedding, none of us will come. Is that what you want? To get married without your family there?" The ultimatum hung between us. In that moment, something broke inside me, the last thread of hope that they might someday see me, value me, love me as I was. "Yes," I said quietly. "If that's my only option, then yes. I'd rather get married surrounded by people who actually care about me than pander to a family that never has." She hung up without another word. I sat in silence for a long while, processing what had just happened. Then, slowly, a plan began to form in my mind. If my family wanted to play hardball, I could play too. There was one person they'd excluded from their lives even more completely than they had me, my aunt. The details of what happened with my aunt had always been murky, but over the years, I'd picked up pieces of the story. There had been some major falling out, orchestrated primarily by my father. He'd somehow turned my grandmother against her, and my mother had contributed to problems in my aunt's marriage. Whatever had happened had been bad enough to make her leave town and cut contact completely. Finding her wasn't easy. She'd changed her number, and none of our mutual contacts seemed to know where she'd gone. Finally, through some social media detective work, I discovered she actually lived only an hour away from me. The realization was startling. She'd been so close all this time, yet completely removed from my life. I tried calling and emailing, but received no response. Finally, I decided to take a more direct approach. On a Saturday morning, I drove to the address I'd found and knocked on her door. When she opened it, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair had gone completely gray, and new lines etched her face. But her eyes, they were the same warm, intelligent eyes I remembered. She didn't recognize me at first either. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. "Aunt Claire? It's me, Katie." Her expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Katie? Little Katie?" She stared at me for a long moment, then her face hardened. "Why are you here? Did your parents send you?" "No," I said quickly. "They have no idea I'm here. In fact, they'd probably be furious if they knew." She studied me suspiciously for another moment, then her posture relaxed slightly. "You'd better come in." Her home was small but cozy, filled with books and plants. We sat at her kitchen table, both clutching mugs of tea, an awkward silence between us. "I'm getting married," I finally said. She blinked in surprise. "Congratulations." "Thank you. I wanted to invite you to the wedding." "Why?" The question was direct, her gaze penetrating. So I told her everything, about growing up as the family scapegoat, about being sent away to boarding school, about my sister and Jason, about my mother's ultimatum. As I spoke, her expression softened, and by the time I finished, there were tears in her eyes. "Oh, Katie," she whispered. "I had no idea it was that bad for you. When I left, you were just a child. I worried about you, but I convinced myself you'd be okay." "What happened, Aunt Claire? Why did you leave?" She was quiet for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "It's a long, ugly story. Are you sure you want to hear it?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I need to understand." So she told me her story, and it was even worse than I'd imagined. My aunt had been dating a man my grandmother didn't approve of, not because there was anything wrong with him, but because he didn't come from the right kind of family. My parents had seen an opportunity to drive a wedge between my aunt and grandmother, feeding each of them lies about what the other had said or done. They told my grandmother that my aunt was planning to elope and didn't care about family opinions. They told my aunt that my grandmother had issued an ultimatum, either break up with the boyfriend or be disowned. When my grandmother had a minor heart attack shortly afterward, my father refused to let my aunt visit her in the hospital, claiming my grandmother had explicitly said she didn't want to see her. In truth, my grandmother had been asking for her. The manipulation continued for months. My parents spread rumors that my aunt had stolen money from my grandmother's accounts to pay her boyfriend's debts. They intercepted phone calls and letters, ensuring that the two women couldn't reconcile. Eventually, my aunt felt so betrayed and excluded that she left town, believing her own mother had rejected her. I never knew the truth until years later, Aunt Claire said softly. By then, too much time had passed. I was too ashamed to reach out to your grandmother, and I assumed the damage was irreparable. It's not too late, I said impulsively. Grandma still talks about you. She keeps your picture in her bedroom. Hope flickered in her eyes, but she quickly suppressed it. It's been 15 years, Katie. And she's still here. You're still here. Come to my wedding, she'll be there. Talk to her. She hesitated, clearly torn. Your parents will be furious. I smiled grimly. Honestly? That's kind of the point. After some more convincing, she agreed to come. I left her house feeling simultaneously lighter and more anxious. I was taking a huge risk, but somehow, it felt right. If my family wanted to talk about rebuilding relationships, we'd rebuild the one they deliberately destroyed. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and clear. My mother-in-law had organized a beautiful pre-ceremony brunch for the bridesmaids, and for a few blissful hours, I was able to forget about the impending family drama and just enjoy being a bride. That illusion of peace shattered when I arrived at the venue and saw my mother, father, and sister waiting in the foyer. My sister was wearing a white dress, not quite bridal, but close enough to make the statement clear. Katie, darling, my mother cooed, air kissing both my cheeks. Everything looks quaint. I suppose it's what you could manage. My sister smirked. The flowers are a bit sparse, aren't they? I would have gone with something more elegant. I forced a smile. Thank you both for coming. The ceremony will start soon, why don't you find your seats? As they moved toward the ceremony space, I spotted my aunt entering the building. She looked nervous but determined in a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. Our gazes met, and I gave her an encouraging nod. My mother saw her a moment later. The color drained from her face, and she grabbed my father's arm so tightly her knuckles went white. What is she doing here? She hissed, loud enough for me to hear. I invited her, I said calmly. She's family, after all. And as you said, Mom, weddings are a great opportunity to rebuild relationships. The look of pure fury on my mother's face was almost worth the years of emotional neglect. Almost. Before she could respond, Emma, my sister-in-law and maid of honor, swooped in. Katie, the photographer needs you for some final shots before the ceremony. She smoothly steered me away, whispering, I've got this. Go get ready. The ceremony itself was beautiful, more perfect than I could have imagined. Walking down the aisle toward Michael, seeing the love in his eyes, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This man, this moment, this was my real family now. I caught glimpses of my relatives during the vows. My grandmother, elegant in lavender, dabbing at her eyes. My aunt, seated strategically far from my parents, looking both happy for me and anxious about what was to come. My parents, stiff and uncomfortable, clearly fuming. My sister, on her phone for half the ceremony, barely bothering to look up. After the I-DOS and the kiss, we proceeded to the reception, held in an adjoining garden. That's when things really went off the rails. I noticed my aunt approach my grandmother cautiously. They exchanged a few words, then moved to a more private area to talk. As they walked away, my mother noticed and immediately tried to follow them. My father, seeing her reaction, joined her. Emma intercepted them smoothly. The photographer wants some family photos. Why don't you come this way? Not now, my mother snapped. I need to speak with my mother. I'm sure whatever it is can wait a few minutes, Emma insisted, her pleasant tone belying her firm stance. Meanwhile, my sister had cornered a group of guests and appeared to be holding court. I caught snippets of her conversation as I passed, always been this way. Attention-seeking behavior. Poor parents have had to deal with so much. I was about to confront her when Michael appeared at my side, sliding his arm around my waist. Everything okay? He asked quietly. No, I admitted. But it will be. I just need to. I was interrupted by a commotion near the back of the garden. My parents had evaded Emma and were now pounding on the door of the small room where my grandmother and aunt had gone to talk. "Mother!" My father was shouting. "Don't listen to her lies. Let me in right now." Guests were staring. Michael's family looked horrified. This was exactly what I had been afraid of, my family turning my wedding into a spectacle about them. I marched over, fury building with each step. "Stop it," I hissed. "This is my wedding day. If Grandma wants to talk to Aunt Claire privately, that's her business." My father whirled on me, his face contorted with rage. "This is all you're doing, isn't it? Inviting her here, stirring up ancient history? Haven't you caused enough problems in this family?" "Me?" I laughed incredulously. "I've spent my entire life trying to exist in a family that treated me like an inconvenience. The only problems here are the ones you created." "How dare you speak to your father that way?" my mother interjected, her voice ice cold. "After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me?" I challenged. "Sent me away? Ignored my accomplishments? Forced me to invite the sister who's made my life hell since I was born?" My father stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You ungrateful little..." "That's enough." Michael's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He positioned himself between me and my father, his normally gentle face set in hard lines. "Sir, I respect that you're Katie's father, but I will not allow you to speak to my wife that way. Not today, not ever." My mother-in-law appeared beside us, her expression equally resolute. "I think it's best if you both leave. Now." "How dare you?" my father sputtered. "Do you know who I am? I'm paying for half of this wedding." "Actually, you're not," I said quietly. "Grandma is. She told me last month that the checks have been coming from her account, not yours." Something in my father snapped. "You worthless, ungrateful child. I never wanted you anyway. You've been nothing but a disappointment since the day you were born." The garden fell silent. Guests froze, drinks halfway to their lips, horrified by the outburst. I felt like I'd been physically struck, my chest tight with pain. Michael's jaw clenched. Without a word, he signaled to the security team we'd hired, a precaution that now seemed prescient, and they promptly escorted my parents from the venue. My sister, seeing what was happening, quickly followed, shouting about how cruel and selfish I was. After they left, Janet wrapped her arms around me. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. No one should have to hear those things, especially not on their wedding day. Maybe we should take a break," Emma suggested gently. "Give you a moment to breathe." I looked around at the concerned faces of our guests and made a decision. No. I'm not letting them ruin this day. Let's continue the celebration. And we did. We danced, we laughed, we cut the cake. For a few hours, I was able to push the confrontation out of my mind and focus on the joy of being married to Michael. It wasn't until later, when I checked my phone, that I discovered my sister had taken her drama to social media. She'd gone live on Instagram, tears streaming down her face, on cue, no doubt, telling her followers about how I'd thrown our parents out of my wedding, how I'd always been jealous of her, how I'd invited the family traitor just to cause trouble. "I've tried so hard to be a good sister," she sobbed dramatically, "but Katie's always pushed me away. She's impossible to love." The comments were flowing in, her followers offering sympathy and support. "You're too good for her," one wrote. "Family should come first," said another. I felt sick. Even from a distance, she was trying to control the narrative, to paint herself as the victim and me as the villain. Some things never changed. I called my grandmother, desperate for some clarity in the midst of chaos. To my surprise, she sounded calm, almost peaceful. "Katie, darling," she said warmly. "What a beautiful ceremony. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Grandma," I managed. How did things go with Aunt Claire?" There was a pause, then a soft sigh. "We should have had this conversation years ago. Claire told me everything, how your parents manipulated us, kept us apart. All those lies. I can't believe I fell for them." "So you believe her?" "Of course I do. Your father has always had a talent for manipulation. I was just too blind to see it when it came to my own children." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've missed 15 years with my daughter because of their lies. I won't miss another day." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. At least something good had come from this day of chaos. The aftermath of the wedding was intense. My sister's social media tirade had gained traction, with people I barely knew messaging me to ask what had really happened. I refused to engage with the gossip, focusing instead on the beginning of my marriage and the unexpected reunion between my grandmother and aunt. A month after the wedding, after consulting with a lawyer, I decided to take legal action against my sister for defamation. The video she'd posted had damaged my reputation, and the lies she'd spread had caused real emotional distress. According to my lawyer, I had a solid case. My aunt, inspired by my stand, decided to sue my parents for manipulation and mental harassment. With the evidence she had, old emails, text messages where my father had impersonated my grandmother, letters my mother had intercepted, she too had a strong case. My parents were livid. They called, texted, left voicemails alternating between rage and pleading. "We're family," my mother insisted in one message. "You don't sue family. We've always protected you," my father claimed in another. "Everything we did was for your own good." I deleted the messages without responding. I was done with their version of family. The court cases proceeded. My sister's defamation case was relatively straightforward. The judge reviewed the video, heard testimony about the false claims she'd made, and ruled in my favor. She was ordered to pay damages and, most satisfyingly, to post a public retraction and apology on all her social media platforms. Watching her forced to admit she'd lied, to acknowledge that she'd deliberately tried to damage my reputation, it was a vindication I'd waited my entire life for. My aunt's case against my parents was more complex but equally successful. The evidence of their years of manipulation was overwhelming. Text messages where my father pretended to be my grandmother telling my aunt to stay away. Emails where my mother spread vicious lies about my aunt to mutual friends. The judge was visibly disturbed by the pattern of emotional abuse and awarded my aunt significant damages. She also granted a restraining order, legally ensuring that my parents couldn't continue their harassment. The final blow to my parents came from my grandmother. After seeing the full extent of their manipulation revealed in court, she decided to remove them from her will entirely. Instead, she named my aunt and me as her sole beneficiaries. "You both deserve this after everything," she told us. "It's the only way I can try to make things right." My parents, predictably, didn't take this well. When direct contact failed, thanks to the restraining orders, they tried a new tactic, going through my mother-in-law. They called and texted her, trying to paint me as manipulative and ungrateful, hoping to drive a wedge between me and my new family. Janet, however, was having none of it. She forwarded me their pathetic messages with a note, "Thought you should see this. Don't worry, I told them exactly where they could shove their opinions." Following my aunt's example, I also got a restraining order against my parents and sister. It gave me peace of mind knowing they couldn't legally continue their harassment. It's been 6 months since the wedding now. Michael and I are settling into married life, enjoying the calm after the storm. My grandmother and aunt have reconciled completely, they're even living together now, making up for lost time. They come over for dinner every Sunday, and those gatherings have become the family meals I always longed for as a child. Sometimes I wonder if things could have been different. If my parents had ever truly seen me, if my sister had ever treated me with genuine kindness, could we have been a real family? But then I look at the family I've built, Michael, his parents and sister, my grandmother and aunt, and I realize I didn't lose a family. I escaped a toxic situation and found where I truly belong. My wedding day wasn't the fairy tale I'd imagined, but in a strange way, it gave me something more valuable, freedom from the people who never wanted me to thrive. And for that, chaotic as it was, I'll always be grateful.